They called them passenger planes. They came with airline seats, painted windows, and no guns on board. Until the day they bombed London. In 1944, Nazi Germany built a flying wing bomber that would not look out of place in any modern air force, 4 decades before the advent of stealth technology. Germany's most lethal bombers were first constructed as mock civilian airliners, with airline interiors and passenger windows, specifically to fool weapons inspectors from across the globe. The Heinkel He 111 was one of the principal bombers that killed over 40,000 British civilians during the Blitz, but it began as a high-speed airliner that never had a single passenger. These deceptions changed warfare forever, and some of the technology captured in these activities is still classified to this day. Hit the like button, subscribe for more secret history, and discover how German Zeppelin engineers secretly developed the planes that fly over your heads today. The sky giants that started it all. Germany's bomber legacy starts not with World War II, but with floating giants that pioneered the world's most feared strategic bombers. Zeppelin airships transformed warfare by introducing terror to enemy cities far from any battlefield. The first German military Zeppelin raid was on Liège, Belgium, in August 1914. But it was British raids that changed the game. There were repeated bombing raids on Britain, and over 500 lives were lost. Suddenly, warfare had a horrific new face. Civilians were no longer safe behind the lines. These massive airships could deliver over 4,000 pounds of bombs, and had a range that was beyond that of normal planes. They bombarded Paris, London, and strategic points all over Europe, making the world familiar with the psychological terror of aerial bombardment. But they were hydrogen gas-powered, and thus they were waiting for aerial bombs ready to explode. By 1917, the Germans had learned their lesson. When the OHL lost faith in the Zeppelins, they opted for something new: the Gotha bombers. The original flying fortresses. The Gotha GV was the German answer to the Zeppelin vulnerability. These aircraft flew 15,000 feet above today's fighter's top ceiling, with an 800-kilometer or 500-mile range, and up to 500 kilograms or 1,100 pounds of bombs. The Gotha became history's first effective strategic bombing capabilities. On the night of June 13th, carried out by Gotha bombers, the raid claimed 527 casualties, including 104 deaths, some of whom were children. The bombing of a school in London continued to be one of the most controversial air bombardments of the past, setting an ominous precedent for what was to come for several decades. These twin-engine giants were capable of outpacing most of the fighters of the time and delivering their deadly payload with impunity. They were the first in human history when cities hundreds of miles away from the battlefields became legitimate targets for the military. Deception by design. Fast forward to the 1930s, and Germany had a new problem. The Treaty of Versailles forbade it from building military aircraft. So they did not build military aircraft, technically. The Heinkel He 111 rolled off production lines as a high-speed passenger airliner. It sported big cabin windows, spacious seating arrangements, and all the comforts of civilian air travel. Lufthansa even employed some for promotional purposes. But beneath this peaceful facade lay something altogether different. The cargo bay of the aircraft was just the right size to hold bombs. The observation windows provided perfect fields of fire for defense guns. The passenger cabin could easily be converted into stations for bombardier and navigators. This was not just brilliant engineering. This was industrial-scale systemic deception. When war came in 1939, these airliners simply dropped their disguises. Seats were ripped out, bomb racks installed, and machine guns mounted. Within weeks, Europe's most advanced passenger plane had become one of its most feared bombers. The Speed Demon's secret identity. The Dornier Do-17 took this bluff further. It was built as a mail plane for Deutsche Lufthansa and marketed as the world's fastest civilian aircraft. Airline companies were keen, but the passenger compartment was too small to be utilized commercially. Perfection. The compact interior wasn't a weakness. It was a design element. The slender fuselage that made it inadaptable for flight as a passenger plane made it nearly invulnerable to attack by an enemy fighter. The Flying Pencil, as the Do-17 was nicknamed, could slice through air cover and release its payload before anyone knew it was there. Like the HE-111, the Do-17's mail compartment was ideally adapted to carry bombs. Its speed gave it the critical edge in the early wartime years, and its innocuous origins meant that hundreds were already in the production line when foes discovered what they had on their hands. The ultimate war machine. But the German bomber pride of place went to the Junkers Ju-88. This aircraft did not just pretend. This aircraft could be anything the Luftwaffe needed. Dive bomber? Check. Night fighter? Check. Recon plane? Check. Heavy bomber? Check. Torpedo bomber? Check. It was the ultimate fighting machine that could be whatever the mission called for, and deadly in any of those capacities. The Ju-88 could attack ships at sea level, chase enemy bombers at 30,000 feet, or cover a city block in layer-by-layer precision. It was Germany's highest produced aircraft, with over 15,000 made, proving that flexibility was as valuable as specialization. Strategic blindness. During the first 3 years of World War II, Germany's bomber triad, HE-111, Do-17, and Ju-88, was invincible. They overwhelmed Poland, destroyed Rotterdam, and brought London to its knees during the Blitz. But victory created complacency, and complacency created strategic disaster. General Walter Weaver had anticipated this. He had promoted long-range strategic bombers that would penetrate deep into enemy territory and deliver knockout punches. But when Weaver died in a plane crash in 1936, his dream died with him. His successors chose speed over payload, tactical flexibility over strategic reach, a decision that would eventually catch up with Germany. These aircraft were designed for war lightning, not for year-long campaigns. They could destroy a battlefield or terrorize a city, but could not win an attrition war against entire nations. The longer the war dragged on, the more impossible this intrinsic flaw became to disregard. Engineering nightmare. Germany did try to build a real heavy bomber, the Heinkel He-177. On paper, it was gorgeous. Long range, massive payload, innovative design. In reality, it was a mechanical disaster that murdered more of its pilots than enemy fire ever managed to kill. The He-177's 2 engines were bolted back-to-back in single nacelles, an engineering compromise that produced disastrous consequences. Engine fires were routine, to the point that crews wouldn't fly it and gave the aircraft its ominous nickname, the Flaming Coffin. As many He-177s were lost to their engines as to enemy fighters. It was the epitome of everything wrong with late-war German aviation. Great concepts undermined by desperate design and a lack of thorough testing. Technology from tomorrow. But while conventional bombers were struggling, German engineers were hard at work on something that appeared to have been conceived on another planet altogether. Deep beneath the ground, in secret workshops, the Horten brothers were perfecting the revolutionary HO-229, a flying wing several decades ahead of stealth technology. The Horten HO-229 was a jet-powered flying wing bomber attack aircraft, designed with radar-absorbing materials and sharp angles that made it virtually invisible to radar. When the prototype was captured by American troops in 1945, they were stunned. This aircraft resembled one from 1985, not 1945. They chose the materials, such as wood and others, for this purpose, in particular to suppress the radar signature, Reimer Horten designer admitted later. They did that of our own inspiration, they claimed. The HO-229 was more than just another plane. It was the birth of stealth technology, 40 years ahead of the existence of the word. Behind enemy lines, the untold stories. Behind every technical triumph were human stories that textbooks don't generally share. Luftwaffe bomber squadrons were not sinister villains, but young men, often just out of adolescence, following orders in a war not of their making. Their domestic letters indicate fear, homesickness, and more uncertain ideas about their mission. One pilot on an AG-111 noted, "We flew off in the dark. We bombed cities that used to resemble our own. There were moments when I hoped to come back. Other moments when I wondered whether I would come back." These men watched London burn, knowing that Berlin would soon be burning too. They saw cities in Poland reduced to rubble, knowing that German cities would be next. The bomber war was not about technology. It was about ordinary people having to do extraordinary, terrible things. Last-ditch experiments. Since the war was not favoring Germany, bomber production was becoming desperate. The Mistral project essentially straddled top-of-the-line fighter planes on bombers. The fighter flew the bomb-laden bomber to the target, then dropped off at the very last moment. It was kamikaze tactics without the suicidal urge. Other projects never left the drawing board. The Silbervogel suborbital bomber that in theory would be able to reach New York. The America Bomber program, designed to strike the U.S. mainland. And dozens of other fantasies born of desperation rather than engineering reality. These paper dreams reveal to us how low German aviation had fallen from the orderly deceptions of the 1930s to the mad experimentations of 1945. Innovation had given way to fantasy, and engineering to hope. Silent wings, modern skies. Germany's bomber program was kaput when World War II ended. The country was split, its aircraft industry shattered, and its engineers scattered. But German aviation expertise did not vanish. It merely changed sides. Operation Paperclip brought hundreds of German engineers into America, their blueprints, prototypes, and innovative ideas in tow. The Horten HO-229 design principles would find their way into American stealth projects later on. The jet propulsion technology that powered the Me-262 became the foundation for current aviation. But the German bomber saga was not over in 1945. When the nation was allowed to rebuild its air force in the 1950s, German designers were again leading the way in aviation technology. The Phoenix rises. The Panavia Tornado, its first flight being on August 14, 1974, and its induction into service in 1979 and 1980, was born through multinational cooperation between the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. This swing-wing wonder had the capability of carrying out low-level penetration missions that would have left Walter Weaver in awe. The PA-200 Tornado Terrain Following Radar, TFR, allows for extremely low-level flight adapted to the configuration of the ground at 60 meters altitude. Capabilities that antedate those pre-war Germany ever even imagined. The Tornado was all that post-war German aviation had learned from its tempest-tossed past. International cooperation instead of expansionist brutality. Defensive power instead of offensive horror. And precision technology instead of desperate improvisation. Hidden secrets, lasting impact. Today, German Bundestag voted to purchase 180 Eurofighter fighter jets, carrying on a tradition of aviation supremacy that stretches more than 100 years. But the true legacy of German bombers is not in museums or history books. It's flying above us this very moment. All stealth fighters owe their technology to investigations first made in the Horten HO-229. All modern commercial airliners owe their technology to German engineering innovation in jet propulsion. All precision-guided munitions owe their heritage to technology first flight tested on German bombers. The Zeppelin attacks that intimidated London in 1917 shattered the world to strategic bombing. The Gotha bombers proved that no metropolis was beyond the reach of warfare. The deceptive HE-111s proved how civilian technology could conceal military targets. And the advanced HO-229 presaged the stealth planes that define modern air power. Conclusion. From the World War I floating giants to the stealth prototypes of 1945, from the 1930s disguised airliners to today's precision strike fighters, German bomber tales tell the full history of aerial warfare. These machines not only changed the face of military history, human history. They proved that distance was no barrier, that seas were only obstacles to be overcome, and that the sky itself could become a battleground. They proved that the highest technological achievements are most likely to erupt from mankind's darkest periods. The Zeppelins are gone. The Gothas are silent. The Heinkels are museum pieces. But their legacy lives on in every aircraft that flies today, in every GPS-guided missile, and in every stealth bomber that slips invisible through enemy radar. Germany's bomber stories aren't just about one nation's military aviation. They're about how human ingenuity, for better or worse, has no limits when pushed to its breaking point. And there you have it. More than a century of bomber development in Germany, from hovering airships to invisible jets, from sneaky passenger aircraft to accurate attack planes. They all link each period of modern flight. If this blew your mind, hit the like button and let me know in the comments what you think was the most powerful German bomber. Subscribe for more secret stories that connect the dots between historical aviation and the tech we use today. Because next week, we're showing how Nazi rocket scientists secretly built NASA's space program. Trust me, the rabbit hole is deeper than you can imagine. Share this video with everyone who feels like they're experts on aviation history, because I promise you, they've never heard these connections made before.